Welcome to today's Explainer. I'm really glad you're tuning in. Today, we're acting as your virtual coach to unpack some fascinating source material about something we literally all deal with, and that's the quiet, consistent voice inside your head. You know the exact one I'm talking about, right? In this session, we're going to break down exactly what that voice is, where it comes from, and most importantly, how to actually silence it. Let's just dive straight into the mechanics of our own minds. So, let's start off with a pretty tough question. Why do you listen to that voice? I mean, we spend years, sometimes decades, believing a voice that constantly tells us we're falling behind our peers or that we just aren't quite good enough. We tend to take its word as absolute truth without ever putting it on the witness stand. Why do we do that? Well, to figure that out, we first have to look at how this voice actually operates. We're all painfully familiar with the symptoms. The inner critic doesn't usually scream at you. It speaks quietly, but man, it is relentless. It's that voice that kind of chuckles when you make a tiny slip-up, whispering that you always mess things up. And here's the worst part. It's the voice that immediately pulls out a mental checklist of every single awkward thing you've ever said or done, the exact second you're trying to feel confident. It really is a master of timing. Now, a crucial takeaway from the material is defining what this critic actually is. It's not your enemy, and it certainly wasn't born evil. It's actually a broken protection system. It genuinely believes it is helping you. It thinks that acting like a harsh drill sergeant and keeping you small is the only way to keep you safe from failure or judgment. The cruel irony here is that it's trying to protect you by completely tearing you down. The real problem is how we interact with it. We usually treat this voice like it's this perfectly objective, stern but fair judge, right? Well, scratch that. Reality check. It's actually just a frightened guard dog. It's a dog that never learned to stop barking at every single shadow it sees. Once you realize it's reacting entirely out of fear and not facts, everything changes. Okay, so to tame this guard dog, we really need to understand its origins. Let's get into part 1, echoes from your childhood. This is where it all began. As the sources explain, your inner critic was forged in your past, essentially assembled piece by piece over time. It started way back in early childhood with every disappointed sigh from an adult, or every time you were compared to a sibling. Moving into grade school, it got fed by teachers who relentlessly circled all your mistakes in bright red ink without ever really noticing what you got right. Fast forward to today, and you've taken all those external voices and internalized them into that drill sergeant. Because of that history, we mistakenly learned a very, very dangerous lesson. We internalized the idea that punishing ourselves was basically the required price of being good enough. We think if I'm not hard on myself, I'm going to fail. But that is a complete myth. Your self-worth absolutely does not require a toll of self-abuse. So, how do we actually fix this? That brings us to part 2, the power of externalization. It's time to change the conversation. First up, you have to actively change the conversation. When the critic starts yapping, try consciously focusing your mind on something entirely different for a bit to break the loop. Second, and this is huge, stop treating the voice like an all-knowing oracle. It does not know the future, and it certainly doesn't know your true value. The moment you stop treating it like an oracle, you create distance, and you've already won half the battle. And that leads us to a core mantra for today's explainer. You are not your thoughts. You are simply the one hearing them. Because you are the listener, you hold the ultimate power here. You get to choose which thoughts to actually believe. And the ones you choose to believe dictate who you are in that moment. You are in the driver's seat, not the critic. Moving right along to part 3, the third person reframe. Let's look at practicing self-compassion. Think about this. Imagine you forget a big deadline at work. Your inner critic instantly jumps in and says, "You're such an idiot for forgetting that deadline." Now, I want you to pause. Reframe that dialogue entirely. What would you say to a friend who forgot a deadline? You'd probably say something like, "Hey, people slip up sometimes. You aren't an idiot. You're just a human being with a whole lot on your plate." You see the difference there? Which brings us to a really powerful question. When that internal voice is attacking you, stop and ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? Of course not. No way. So if you wouldn't say it to someone you care about, why on earth are you allowing that voice to say it to you? We've got to start extending the exact same grace we give others directly back to ourselves. And if you're sitting there thinking self-compassion is just some kind of fluffy feel-good concept, the research of Dr. Kristin Neff proves otherwise. Speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you truly love actually leads to greater resilience, motivation, and mental health than self-criticism ever could. That drill sergeant, It doesn't motivate you. It drains you. Kindness is what actually builds you up. Finally, let's wrap up our tools with part 4, the mental space audit. We need to check your environment. Here's the thing. Your inner critic did not develop in a vacuum. It is actively fed and encouraged by the voices around you right now. So, who are you surrounded by? Does your boss regularly speak to you in harsh criticism but just disguise it as feedback? Does your partner roll their eyes when you enthusiastically share a new idea? You have to identify the external sources that are actively validating your internal critic. Now, I know it's not always easy to just completely overhaul your environment overnight, but you can start taking these steps today. Step 1, start setting firm boundaries. Step 2, consciously mute everything that makes you feel small, whether that's specific social media feeds or certain conversations. And Step 3, aggressively limit your time with people who just leave you feeling drained. By doing this, you are stepping into a totally new role. You become the curator of your own mental space. Think of it like being the museum director of your own mind. You get to decide which exhibits, which voices, which people, which thoughts get to be proudly on display, and which ones get permanently locked away in the basement. So as we close out today's explainer, I want to leave you with one vital question as you step back out into the real world. You now know this critic is just a frightened dog formed by past echoes, and you've got the tools to reframe it and curate your environment. So the ultimate question remains, whose voice will you choose to believe today? The choice is entirely yours. That wraps up our explainer for today. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.